I once got fined by Karen because my grass grew slightly tall, just an inch and a half over the HOA standard. In other words, about a finger taller than her ego. I had lived peacefully at the end of Maple Grove Road for 7 years. The grass grew, birds sang, squirrels played, nature was calm and kind. Until Karen moved in. No one invited her, yet she showed up with the entire HOA rulebook like it was the Bible and she was God. 3 days after Karen moved in, I got an official warning letter. Your lawn edge violates the community landscaping standards. That patch of grass? I hadn't even had time to mow it, it had just rained. I laughed, and I mowed the lawn. But that day, I also planted an idea. If Karen thought my grass was too tall, she'd better brace herself for a cornfield taller than a man right outside her window. And guess what? I actually did it. Welcome to the tale of HOA, corn, and a revenge so sweet, it comes by the ear. I bought the plot at the end of Maple Grove because it didn't feel like a typical neighborhood. It felt like a slice of nature that somehow slipped through the cracks. Here, lawns were mowed when you had time, squirrels held permanent residency in the oak trees, and bees didn't get sued for flying over fences. Everything was peaceful. Until Karen moved in. You know, the type blonde ponytail, always wearing a Live, Laugh, Love t-shirt, and clutching a clipboard like she was about to audit an Amazon warehouse. She didn't create the HOA. But the moment she arrived, it started acting like her personal special ops unit. For the first 3 days, she sent reminder notes. On the fourth, she showed up with the landscape officer, a guy named Chuck, armed with binoculars and a grass height measuring stick. I used to think HOA rules were just an excuse to keep the neighborhood looking nice. But to Karen, they were weapons of mass neighbor destruction. And the first casualty? Me, owner of the illegal lawn after a spring shower. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We can't let you drag down the standards of the community because of grass." I smiled and thought to myself, just wait, Karen. Grass is nothing. I've got corn. After the grass exceeded regulation height by 1.5 inches incident, I thought that was the end of it. But oh no. That was just the opening scene of HOA, Fast and Furious, Karen Drift. The following week, I got my second warning letter. Landscaping does not meet spring aesthetic standards. Spring aesthetic? This isn't a 5-star resort. I live in Texas. Out here, if your grass survives a hailstorm, it deserves to live. 2 days later came letter number 3. Frequent wildlife activity observed. Please take action to preserve neighborhood tranquility. Turns out, wildlife meant a squirrel, maybe 2. And for the record, they were here before I was. Then came Saturday afternoon. I spotted Karen flanked by 2 HOA board members, measuring sticks in hand, circling my fence like FBI agents investigating a botanical crime scene. I stepped out and asked what they were doing. Karen, without missing a beat, said, "We're just reassessing the uneven green index in your immediate vicinity." Ah, so now grass has an index. Fantastic. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping a beer, watching my lawn get photographed like a suspect in a lineup. And I laughed. Not because I was giving up, but because that morning I had bought corn seeds. And starting tomorrow, my yard would become the first ever HOA intimidation cornfield in Texas history. The next morning, while Karen was busy taping a flyer titled "Proper Lawn Cutting Guidelines" to my front gate, I was 15 miles away at a farm supply store, buying 20 pounds of hybrid F1 corn seeds, a bag of organic fertilizer, and 2 rolls of drip irrigation line. "Where are you planting all this corn?" the cashier asked. I replied deadpan, "Right in the middle of the HOA." When I got home, I hopped on Google and looked up Texas land use laws. Guess what? Turns out, my property sits on what's called a transitional boundary zone. Technically residential, but eligible for experimental agricultural use. I printed out the statute's 7 pages worth. Highlighted in yellow, underlined in red. Karen loves rules? I handed her Chapter 6, Section 14b, as a gift. That afternoon, I started tilling the soil. Karen watched from her window, eyes wide like she'd just seen someone drive a tank across her precious lawn. Day 2, I planted the seeds. Day 3, irrigation system installed. By week 2, corn sprouts were reaching. By week 4, a towering 2-meter wall of green stood tall in the middle of Karen's beloved neighborhood aesthetic. She stormed over. "You can't turn this into a farm. This is an HOA." I handed her a copy of the land use statute and smiled. "I'm not turning it into a farm. I'm just planting something to improve the view from your side." Karen was speechless. When my grass was 6 inches tall, I got fined. But when my corn grew 6 feet tall, it was perfectly legal. And that, my friends, is when the real game began. By week 5, my corn had grown as tall as Karen's SUV, completely blocking the feng shui-approved sunlight from her living room. And just as expected, Karen exploded. On a Monday morning, as I was watering the stalks, she stormed out of her house like a SWAT officer, iPad in hand, screaming, "You're creating a severe case of visual pollution. The HOA would never approve vegetation this tall." I smiled. "You fined me for tall grass, so I chose corn, eco-friendly, useful, and excellent at blocking HOA energy." That evening, I was cordially invited to an emergency HOA meeting. 7 people, 1 cramped room, and one Karen face redder than a microwave popcorn bag at full blast. She presented her case: abnormal landscaping that's negatively impacting neighboring residents' emotional wellness. I presented my case: a printed land use permit, highlighted state regulations, and a short video of Karen screaming at my cornfield. Someone in the room chuckled. Karen snapped her head around like they were weeds needing immediate removal. Finally, the HOA secretary scratched his head and said, "Legally speaking, he's not wrong." The next day, something magical happened. 3 neighbors stopped by asking to borrow corn seeds. One elderly lady said, "Corn blocks sunlight better than a fence, and it's prettier too." From a distance, Karen stood silently, lips pursed tight, watching as the cornfield began to wrap around her pristine world of beige and gray. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to win with arguments. I grew the victory. After the catastrophic HOA meeting failure, Karen went completely silent for a full week. And that was the strangest thing since the day she moved in. No complaints. No warning letters. No laminated community landscape standard signs posted on my lawn Tuesday morning. Just silence. And the sound of corn leaves rustling, like they were celebrating. By week 6, I received an email from the board. Pursuant to Clause 14b of the Local Agricultural Ordinance, the HOA grants an exemption to your household from standard landscaping regulations, provided safety and cleanliness are maintained. In plain English, they gave up. The law had my back. And the corn kept growing. 2 days later, Karen sold her house. No goodbyes. Not even one last passive-aggressive glare. She moved out at sunrise, like a villain in a cowboy movie. Except instead of riding a horse, she drove off in a white Lexus covered in mud. The residents of Maple Grove now call my field the Wall of Corn Justice. I even put up a small sign by the fence. Grass gets fined, corn gets applauded. And you know what? No more HOA letters. No more tape measures. Just me, the squirrels, a few proud stalks of corn, and a victory sweeter than sweet corn itself. I learned something valuable from all this. Never underestimate a guy with a shovel, seeds, and way too much free time. Karen thought she had the rules. I had the printed appendix, 2 copies, a watering can, and a good old dose of American agricultural freedom. And you know what? I didn't have to yell, didn't have to sue. All I had to do was plant. Now, whenever someone asks me, Why do you have a cornfield in the middle of a residential neighborhood? I answer, to remind control freaks that the law has a sweet side. If you've ever had a run-in with an HOA Karen, or if you're currently being harassed over your non-compliant grass, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And who knows? It might just be the next story we feature on this channel. If you enjoy watching legal revenge sweeter than grilled corn, hit that like, smash that subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a harvest. This is the channel where everyday folks teach the HOA a lesson that even lawyers applaud. See you in the next field.